Why did the Admiral stop? That question would echo in the minds of every cadet in Westford Naval Academy long after the sound of his boots faded down the hall. But before that moment, before silence turned sacred, she was just the girl with the dust rag. The one nobody remembered. The one everyone saw but never really looked at. It started the way every morning did. The sound of her cart wheels rattling softly against polished tile, the smell of lemon polish and metal, the rhythm of cloth over glass. Elena Morales moved through the hallway like part of the architecture itself, quiet, steady, invisible. Her sleeves rolled to the elbows, hair tied back, her movements careful enough not to draw attention, but efficient enough that no one ever had reason to stop her. The cadets didn't see her, not really. They saw a uniform that wasn't theirs, a job beneath them, a presence too quiet to challenge their noise. In their world of drills, doctrine, and hierarchy, silence was misinterpreted as insignificance. And so they joked as they passed, laughter echoing off the marble walls. "Make sure my reflection shines today, sweetheart," one would say, his tone casual, cruel in its ease. Another would toss over his shoulder, "Careful, she'll dust you into shape if you stand still too long." Elena never answered. She didn't have to. There was more power in what she didn't say than they could ever understand. She paused sometimes at case 17, the one with the raven. Black and silver, wings spread wide, a shadow in flight. Beneath it only 4 words, unit designation classified. No names, no victories, no stories told. To everyone else it was an empty relic of bureaucracy, but to her it was gravity. Her fingers would hover just above the glass, not touching, but close enough to feel the chill through the reflection. They didn't know she'd grown up with that same insignia taped inside an old box, a secret her mother never spoke of, a ghost that belonged to someone she once called Uncle Marco. He wasn't really family, not by blood, but he'd been part of that unit. Ivory Raven. A name Elena wasn't supposed to know, a story she wasn't supposed to remember. When he died, her mother burned everything. Letters, photos, insignia, all of it, gone in one quiet evening that smelled of smoke and fear. "We don't talk about it ever," her mother had said. But by then, the image of that raven was already burned into Elena's memory. You can't unsee what shapes your soul. Years later, she ended up here at Westford with a cleaning badge on her chest and silence as her armor. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, just a job, just another place to disappear. But the first time she walked into the Hall of Honor and saw that crest behind glass, she had to steady herself against the wall. It wasn't nostalgia. It was something heavier. Recognition. The ghosts were still watching. She'd been here almost a year now. Every morning before the cadets filled the corridors, she wiped away their fingerprints from the cases they never read. Every night before the last lights dimmed, she stood before the raven one more time, whispering words no one would ever hear. "Still here." She wasn't sure who she was saying it to, Marco, the others, herself, but the ritual mattered. Service doesn't end when the mission does. It lingers. It echoes. That morning, Lieutenant Harper had been louder than usual. He always was. Young, sharp jaw, the kind of officer who looked like he practiced his reflection more than his leadership. He leaned against the wall beside her cart, arms crossed, smirk ready. "You know," he said, "if you ever get tired of scrubbing our history, I could use an assistant. Someone to keep my medals shiny when I earn them." His friends laughed. Harper loved an audience. Elena didn't look up. Her hand paused for half a second, pressing the cloth against the glass. A breath in. Then she continued, steady as before. She had learned long ago that some men couldn't stand silence. It made their words echo back at them too loudly. And sure enough, Harper shifted, the laughter fading a little as he turned away. If anyone had been paying attention, they might have noticed the slight tremor in her hand when she moved to the next case. Not from fear, from restraint. Because once, long ago, she'd learned how to silence arrogance, but not here, not anymore. It was near dusk when everything changed. The academy was quieter in the evenings, when the brass had retreated to meetings and cadets were scattered in the gym or the mess. The hallway lights hummed faintly, casting reflections across the polished floors. Elena was finishing her last section, crouched near the baseboards, scrubbing the last streak of dust from the brass plate. Her cart sat behind her, the smell of polish faint but sharp in the air. Then came the sound, slow, steady, measured. Boots. Not the careless rhythm of a cadet, not the hurried click of an officer late for a meeting. This was deliberate, heavy, the kind of stride that carried authority simply by existing. She didn't turn, not yet. Old habits died hard. She focused on the cloth in her hand, the simple rhythm of wipe, breathe, move. The sound drew closer. Cadets in the hall straightened immediately, shoulders squared, voices dropping. Then silence. The Admiral's presence filled the corridor before his voice did. Everyone recognized him, Admiral Rowan Hale, a man carved out of command, with a stare that could cut through armor and an instinct that rarely missed. He'd spent years in operations so classified that even his medals were rumored to be redacted. And now he was here, unannounced. "Room attention," one cadet barked. Every boot hit the ground at once. Elena stayed crouched, polishing. The Admiral's gaze swept across the lined-up cadets, rows of perfect posture and nervous pride, and then stopped. Not at them, past them, toward her. He didn't say a word at first. Just watched, the girl with the dust rag, the quiet figure crouched before case 17. Then finally he spoke. 2 words clear and sharp as glass. "Ivory Raven." Every sound in the hallway died. Cadets blinked in confusion. Some looked at each other, uncertain. The Admiral's hand lifted slightly, pointing at her. "Greenlight." The rag slipped from Elena's hand. It hit the floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence that followed. Her breath caught in her chest. Every heartbeat was thunder now. Those words, she hadn't heard them in 6 years. 6 years since the last mission. 6 years since the last coded message over a secure line. 6 years since she buried that part of herself under layers of anonymity. But now, those 2 words had torn it open again. Ivory Raven, Greenlight. A call, a key, a command. And something deep in her, the part that had learned to sleep, woke up. Slowly she rose, one motion at a time. The rag stayed on the floor. Her posture changed, not visibly to those who didn't know what to look for, but the Admiral saw it immediately. The subtle shift of weight to her heels, shoulders realigning, chin up, the stance of someone trained to act without hesitation. The cadets didn't understand. They whispered, "What's Ivory Raven? Why's he talking to her? Wait her." Elena didn't speak, not yet. Her mind wasn't in that hallway anymore. It was back in a darkened room with flickering screens and static voices. It was the smell of oil, metal, and fear. It was the weight of a rifle pressed against her chest, the whisper of a command through an encrypted channel. Raven 3, confirm visual. Greenlight. And now, standing beneath the academy lights, she realized something that made her pulse tighten. They hadn't forgotten her. They'd just been waiting. The Admiral stepped forward, boots deliberate, every stride measured. He stopped a meter from her, studying her the way one studies a long-lost relic, not disbelief, not surprise, just recognition. "Report," he said simply. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even an order to explain. It was an activation. Elena felt her throat tighten, words trapped somewhere between past and present. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady, controlled. "Awaiting instructions, sir." The cadets flinched at the tone. It wasn't the submissive yes, sir of staff or maintenance. It was crisp, trained, the kind of voice that came from someone who'd been in command, who'd given orders that meant life or death. The Admiral gave a single nod, small, deliberate, as if to say, "There you are." And in that instant, the entire hallway seemed to shift. The balance of power reversed. The cadets, immaculate, confident, now stood as children peering into a world they weren't cleared to see. Their mockery curdled into silence. Harper's smirk vanished. No one dared move. Only the Admiral spoke, his voice carrying through the air like a quiet verdict. "You've all been walking past a ghost," he said, "and you didn't even know it." Elena's eyes flickered to the raven crest behind the glass, black and silver, shining under fluorescent light. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the pull of it, not as a memory, but as belonging. This was no longer about dusting the past, it was about reclaiming it. And as the Admiral's gaze met hers, something unspoken passed between them. Not orders, not explanation, just understanding. Whatever came next, she was no longer invisible. But in her heart, beneath the shock and adrenaline, one thought echoed. Why now? After all this time, why call her back? There was something he wasn't saying, something heavier than nostalgia. And she knew it was only the beginning. Why did she follow him without a word? No one had told her to. No one had dared to. Yet when the Admiral turned and started walking, Elena moved, as if the command had bypassed speech entirely and gone straight to her bones. The corridor stretched before them like a corridor of time, cadets still frozen in formation, the sound of their own breathing too loud in their ears. No one understood what they had just witnessed. A janitor turning soldier, a nobody becoming someone with a call sign older than the academy itself. The Admiral didn't look back. He didn't need to. She kept pace behind him, not quite beside, not quite behind, the silent rhythm of hierarchy balanced by recognition. When they reached the end of the hall, he stopped before the sealed door marked "Restricted Access." A retinal scanner blinked red until he leaned forward, his voice low. "Admiral Rowan Hale, authorization Delta 612." The scanner flashed green. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The Admiral stepped aside, gesturing her in. Inside, the air changed, cooler, quieter, thicker with memory. It wasn't the polished order of the academy halls. It was something older, a room meant for decisions that never reached paper. Maps lined the walls. Screens hummed with classified overlays, blurred shapes of continents, color-coded operations, timestamps that never existed in any public record. He waited until the door sealed behind them before he spoke again. "You kept your head down," he said, voice low but steady, "longer than most could have managed." Elena stood in the center of the room, her hands at her sides, still smudged with polish and dust. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't. Silence was her habit and her defense. The Admiral moved closer, studying her as though measuring what 6 years of quiet had done to her. "You don't look surprised," he said. "I stopped being surprised when people stopped telling the truth," she replied softly. A faint smile touched his lips, not amusement but respect. "You still speak like one of us." "I'm not one of you," she said, "not anymore." He studied her for a long moment. "Maybe not, but someone out there seems to think otherwise." He turned toward the table at the center of the room and opened a metal briefcase that looked heavy enough to anchor a storm. Inside was a folder stamped with the same words she'd once lived under. Ivory Raven /COMPARTMENTLIZED, access only. Her throat tightened. "I thought the unit was dissolved," she whispered. "It was officially, but unofficially," he let the sentence hang. She stared at the folder, the black lettering burning like old wounds reopening. "What happened?" she asked finally. The Admiral didn't answer right away. He closed the case, sat down, and rested his hands on the metal surface, fingers interlaced. The light above cast long shadows across his face. "There's been an incident," he said. "Off the Baltic coast, a covert transport went dark. The people on board weren't supposed to exist, neither was the tech they were moving. Elena felt the old reflex, her brain already scanning the variables, the terrain, the logistics. Even though she hadn't been briefed in years, it came back too easily. "And you need Ivory Raven?" she asked. "We need what's left of it," he said quietly. Her pulse quickened. "There is no what's left, they're gone." "That's what we thought." He turned the briefcase toward her and opened it again, this time revealing not paper but a photograph. Black and white, grainy, a group shot. 7 figures standing in front of a hangar with no insignia. She recognized them all. Her chest tightened as her eyes stopped on the second figure from the left, tall, lean, with the faintest grin. "Landon," she breathed. The Admiral nodded slowly. "He's alive." For a moment the room tilted. Her hand gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "That's not possible. He didn't make it out of Helsinki." "So the reports said." Hale's voice stayed calm, but the weight in it was unmistakable. 3 weeks ago, satellite intel picked up activity consistent with Raven procedures, encrypted comms, ghosted relays, old codes reactivated. Someone's using your language morals. Someone who shouldn't know it. She shook her head slowly. "If it's Landon, why not contact Command directly?" "Because Command no longer exists," he said. "The Ivory Raven files were sealed. You Morales are the last operative listed as active clearance, which means if he's reaching out, he's reaching for you." Silence settled like dust, the same kind she used to wipe from the glass cases every morning, except this dust was history catching up. She turned away, packing slowly, eyes scanning the maps, the red markers glowing faintly on the Baltic coast. If he's alive, he's not alone. Landon wouldn't resurface without reason. He used to say ghosts don't wake unless something's burning. "Then maybe something is," Hale said. Elena stopped. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark glass of a monitor, faint, tired, but no longer the woman who pushed a janitor's cart. The eyes looking back were older, sharper, haunted. "Why me?" she asked finally. "You have entire divisions of operators younger, faster." "None of them were Ivory Raven," he cut in. "None of them can read the patterns he's using, and none of them understand how deep that unit ran." Her silence lingered long enough to make the Admiral sigh, not impatiently, but with the kind of weariness that only comes from respect. "You were never meant to disappear, Morales. You were meant to rest, but rest time over." Something in her chest twisted. She thought she'd buried the soldier in her for good. The woman who could hold her breath for 90 seconds in freezing water, who could shoot through fog with wind calibration done in her head. The woman who'd carried out missions she couldn't admit existed. That woman had died years ago, or at least that's what she told herself. Now the Admiral was standing in front of her, peeling away the grave dirt with 2 words. She exhaled slowly. "You know what happens if I go back in?" "I do." "You know what happens to people who get pulled twice?" "I do." "And you're asking anyway." He didn't blink. "Because you're the only one who can." Her hands clenched at her sides. The walls felt closer now. "Does anyone else know?" "Just the Council, and after tonight only the 2 of us." That was the part that made her stomach sink. "Then this isn't a rescue," she said quietly. Hale's jaw tightened. "No, it's containment." The word landed like a gunshot. He slid the folder toward her. Inside was a mission profile, blurred details, redacted names, timestamps marked with blank spaces. The only line visible read: "Primary objective, asset retrieval designation, Raven 6. Raven 6, Landon." Her heartbeat quickened. "You're telling me you want me to bring him in?" "I'm telling you someone has to, before someone else does." Elena stared down at the file, at the black bars where truth had been buried. She wanted to laugh, not from humor but disbelief. 6 years of silence, 6 years of hiding, and now they wanted her to hunt a ghost she used to call family. Her voice dropped, fragile but edged. "Why me, sir? Because I'm expendable. Because if I don't come back, no one will ask why the janitor went missing." The Admiral's eyes softened, the first crack in his iron demeanor. "No morals because you still care." That stopped her cold. He stood then, walking to the wall where the Academy's insignia hung beside an old clock. "You know what separates soldiers from operators," he said. She stayed silent. "Operators complete missions. Soldiers carry them, even when no one's looking." The words hit harder than he probably meant. She had spent 6 years carrying memories, guilt, silence, and yet part of her knew he was right. She hadn't stayed at the academy by accident. She had stayed close to the ghosts. Hale moved back to the table and pushed a small object toward her, a silver badge, shaped like a wing. "Your clearance chip," he said. "Still active, I kept it that way." She stared at it, the metal catching the light, glinting like the edge of a memory she didn't want to touch. "You knew this day would come," she said quietly. He nodded. "I did." The silence between them stretched heavy, unbroken. Then she picked up the badge. It was cold, almost weightless, but it burned in her palm. "Does it have to be me?" she whispered. "Yes." "Why?" "Because if he's still using Raven codes, then he trusts only one person alive." The words sank into her chest like stones. After a long pause, she looked up at him. "What happens if I say no?" "Then I walk out that door," he said simply. "And within 24 hours someone else comes for you. They won't ask twice, and they won't be as patient as I am." For the first time since the hallway, she felt fear. Not for herself, but for what it meant. If they were willing to pull her out of the shadows, it meant something far bigger was unraveling. Finally she exhaled. "When do I leave?" Hale's eyes softened, relief flickering there like a candle that dared not burn too bright. "Tonight." He reached into the briefcase again and handed her a sealed envelope. "This contains your route, your contact, and the extraction signal. You burn it once read." Elena took it wordlessly. As she turned to leave, the Admiral said quietly, "Morales, when you walk out that door, you don't come back here. You understand?" She nodded. "I never do." The scanner blinked green again and the door opened. The hallway outside was empty now, the cadets long gone, the lights dimmed for the night. Her cart still stood where she had left it, rag on the floor, bucket half full. For a moment she just looked at it. That had been her camouflage, her shield, her exile. Now it looked like a grave marker. She picked up the rag and placed it carefully back on the cart, then whispered to the empty hall, "Still here?" And with that she walked away. The Admiral watched her go, the echo of her steps fading into silence. He knew what she hadn't said aloud. "You don't wake the dead unless the living are in danger." What does it take to wake a soldier who swore she'd never wake again? For Elena Morales, it wasn't the sound of a siren or a call to arms. It was silence, the kind that hums in the bones before everything changes. She stood in her quarters, the door locked, the lights dimmed. The envelope Admiral Hale had given her sat unopened on the table, edges crisp, wax seal unbroken. It looked harmless. Paper always does. But she knew better. Some envelopes weigh more than they should. Some carry the gravity of everything you once buried. Her reflection in the small mirror above the sink looked like someone she didn't recognize. Hair tied back, skin pale from sleepless nights. The same eyes that used to measure wind speed through dust storms and find patterns in chaos now stared at her like they were waiting for permission to exist again. She didn't give it right away. Instead, she sat down, elbows on knees, hands clasped. The hum of the academy at night seeped through the walls, distant footsteps, the faint clatter of metal, the low hum of security lights. Ordinary sounds, but her pulse didn't match them. It beat to something older. The rhythm of readiness. When she finally reached for the envelope, her fingers hesitated halfway. She could almost hear Hale's voice again. "When you walk out that door, you don't come back." She tore it open. Inside were only three things: a folded sheet of instructions, a train ticket with no destination printed, and a photograph. The photo stopped her breath. It was Landon. Older now, lines along his jaw, hair streaked with gray, but the same eyes, calm, focused, the eyes of a man who had made peace with danger long before it made peace with him. Behind him in the photograph, the faint outline of a ship, no markings, just steel and sea. She flipped the paper open. Typed text clean, precise. Rendezvous, Terminal 7, Section 14. Departure 200. No personal effects, no ID. Proceed under civilian cover. Signal phrase, still watching the coast. Response, only when it moves. Her chest tightened. That code was theirs, hers and Landon. A phrase they'd used during recon ops to confirm trust when everything else could be faked. The fact it was still being used meant only one thing: Landon wanted her to come. But there was something else scribbled in ink at the bottom, not typed, handwritten in Hale's firm, slanted script. Trust no one outside Raven. Elena folded the paper back slowly. The warning wasn't unnecessary. She remembered what trust used to cost. She stood, moving toward the locker at the foot of her bed. She had never told anyone what she kept there. They'd have thought it was just spare tools or cleaning supplies. But beneath the false panel, wrapped in an old shirt, were the fragments of a life she'd sworn to forget: her watch, her combat knife, a folded patch with the Raven insignia, and a worn photo of 7 faces in the cold. She unwrapped the knife first. The metal was dull, but her hand remembered the weight instantly. Funny how the body never forgets the feel of the tools that once kept it alive. Next came the watch, analog, military issue, still ticking faintly. The second hand swept in quiet defiance of time itself. She strapped it to her wrist. It fit like it never left. Her reflection in the mirror changed, not because of the clothes, but because of what returned behind the eyes: discipline, precision, purpose. The invisible armor sliding back into place. She sat for a while, tracing the Raven patch with her thumb, the symbol that had once meant everything. Her mind drifted backward 6 years, maybe more, to the day the unit was disbanded. It was raining that night, not the soft kind, the kind that erases footsteps and memory alike. They were told nothing except one sentence: your unit no longer exists. No explanation, no debrief, no ceremony, just silence. She stood beside Landon, both of them drenched, both pretending not to feel the hollow tearing through their ribs. "What do we do now?" she'd asked him. He'd shrugged. "Whatever ghosts do." Which is? Wait. She didn't understand it then. Now she did. Ghosts wait until the living remember them. By 100 hours she was dressed, plain clothes, neutral tones, civilian but efficient. A small backpack slung across her shoulder containing only essentials: water, knife, gloves, a folded jacket. The rest she'd improvise. Before leaving, she turned back one last time, her quarters neat, the cleaning cart gone, replaced by emptiness. The janitor was dead. The operative had returned. And yet somewhere inside her, something grieved. The peace she'd built was fragile, but it had been hers. The night air was colder than she expected when she stepped outside. The academy grounds stretched behind her, rows of dorms glowing faintly under floodlights, the marble hallway windows reflecting nothing but dark sky. She paused by the nearest lamppost, looked up once more and whispered, "Still here." Then she walked away. The train station at that hour was almost empty, the kind of place where time slowed down just enough for the mind to wander. The air smelled faintly of rust and oil. Distant rain pattered on the roof. She found Terminal 7, Section 14, tucked at the far end of the platform, away from cameras and crowds. A single figure stood under a flickering light, holding a newspaper. "Still watching the coast?" she asked quietly. The man lowered the paper just enough to reveal sharp eyes and an unassuming face. He was Landon, younger, civilian clothes, but there was discipline in the way he stood, too still to be ordinary. "Only when it moves," he replied. He folded the paper neatly, tucked it under his arm, and gestured to the train behind him. "Ms. Morales," he said softly, "we've been expecting you." His tone wasn't military, but it wasn't casual either. Something in between. A language she hadn't heard in years, controlled neutrality. They boarded in silence. The train car was empty, its windows tinted, its hum low and steady. The stranger motioned toward a seat. She sat back straight, scanning her surroundings the way she used to: exits, reflections, angles of approach. Muscle memory. He sat opposite her. "You'll have time for details soon," he said. "Right now, just rest." "I don't rest well," she murmured. "I know, none of you do." He leaned forward slightly, studying her. "You really didn't know he was alive?" She met his gaze. "If I had, I wouldn't be here like this." He nodded, as if confirming something. "Then this will be harder than I thought." The train lurched forward, slow at first, then smoother. Through the window, the city lights slipped by like ghosts. Elena's fingers found the edge of the raven patch in her pocket, tracing it absently. She didn't ask where they were going. She already knew. East, always east, toward the cold. Somewhere between miles, exhaustion crept in. Not the physical kind, the one that comes from remembering too much. Her head leaned against the window. The hum of the tracks blended with memory. Voices static. Raven 3 status. Target in motion. Greenlight. She could almost smell the rain again. Then gunfire, shouts, the sound of a door slamming shut forever. Her eyes snapped open. The reflection in the glass stared back, calm now, steady. Whatever haunted her was no longer behind. It was ahead. By the time the train slowed again, dawn was breaking, a pale, washed-out light creeping across the horizon. The stranger stood. "End of the line," he said. They stepped onto an abandoned platform. No signs, no passengers, only the whistle of wind. A black SUV waited near the exit. He opened the door for her, then handed her a small device, a secure communicator. "You'll get coordinates soon," he said. "Until then, you're off-grid. Burn the papers, destroy the badge." She stared at him. "And if I refuse?" He smiled faintly. "You wouldn't be here if you were going to." She climbed in. The door shut. The engine purred softly as they pulled away, the city fading into fog. Elena watched the landscape blur: forests, roads, the ocean glinting faintly in the distance. Her mind was quiet now, but her heart was. She thought of the cadets she'd left behind, still saluting in that hallway. Thought of Hale's eyes when he said, "You still care." Maybe she did, or maybe she just couldn't let the ghosts win. Her communicator blinked once. A single message. Coordinates: 59 degrees N, 24 degrees E. Field designation: Grey Waters. Contact Raven 6. She stared at the screen, pulse steady. The old instinct kicked in: a calculation, preparation, distance, time. Grey Waters. The Baltic coast. She leaned back in her seat, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. "All right, Landon," she whispered. "Let's see what you couldn't tell them." Outside, the sky brightened, pale and unforgiving, a dawn that didn't care what it revealed. And as the road curved toward the sea, Elena Morales closed her eyes, breathing in the air of a world she thought she'd left behind. She wasn't ready for what waited. But readiness had never mattered. Only resolve did. And resolve she still had plenty of. How do you find a ghost when you were trained to be one yourself? The Baltic wind carried salt and silence in equal measure as Elena stepped off the unmarked SUV. The coastline stretched ahead, flat, gray, endless. The kind of place the world forgot about because forgetting was easier than asking why the air smelled like history. She adjusted her coat, the cold biting through layers. Her boots sank slightly into the sand, crunching over pebbles and sea glass. To anyone watching, she was just another traveler on the wrong shore, but her eyes moved differently, calculated, measuring distance, cover, exits. The language of survival never left her tongue. The man from the train, her escort, hadn't said a word since they left the city. When the SUV door closed behind her, he offered only a short nod and drove away. She didn't watch it disappear. She didn't need to. The mission had begun the moment she saw the sea. A fishing village crouched a mile down the coast, a scattering of rusted rooftops and weather-battered boats moored to wooden pylons. The smell of diesel hung heavy. Somewhere, a dog barked, sharp and distant. Elena pulled her collar higher and walked. The cold sharpened her focus. She'd been briefed only in fragments, a location, a name, a warning. But she knew enough to trust her instincts more than her orders. The photograph of Landon was folded in her pocket, edges soft from how many times she'd looked at it since the train. He had taught her everything that mattered. How to disappear, how to improvise, how to know when the mission wasn't the mission at all. And if he was alive, using Raven codes, it meant one of two things. Either he was running from something bigger than command, or he'd become it. Neither option comforted her. She reached the first building, a small cafe clinging to the edge of the pier, its windows fogged with warmth and the smell of coffee seeping through cracked frames. She stepped inside, the bell above the door giving a tired jingle. The man behind the counter looked up briefly. Mid-40s, heavy jacket, beard thick with salt and years. His eyes lingered a second too long. Locals had a way of recognizing outsiders. "Cold morning," he said in broken English. "Colder nights," she replied. He smiled faintly and poured coffee into a chipped mug. "You staying long?" "Depends on the tide." That was her signal phrase, generic enough to sound meaningless, deliberate enough to draw a reaction if she had the right contact. The man's smile didn't fade, but his hand twitched once before setting the cup down. He nodded toward the window. "The tide comes fast here, don't turn your back on it." It was the response. Elena's pulse steadied. "Then I'll keep facing it," she said softly. He slid a folded slip of paper under the cup. "Fisher's cabin," he murmured. "End of the dock, he left before dawn. Keys are on the table." She nodded once, took a sip of coffee she didn't taste, and left without looking back. The cabin sat at the farthest end of the pier, half hidden behind crates and ropes. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and salt. Dust motes floated through thin light filtering from a cracked window. On the table sat what she expected, a map, coordinates circled in red, and a short note written in precise block letters. Grey Waters, 59 degrees 02 N, 24 degrees 28 E, Dock 11. Contact R6, if COMPROMICD burn. Yell. She ran a thumb over the letter. The handwriting was his, Landon. Even after all these years, the strokes were unmistakable, steady, efficient, like the man himself. But something felt off. The ink wasn't dry enough, fresh, meaning this note wasn't old intel. It had been written within the last day or two. He was close. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin walls. She scanned the rest of the room, fishing gear, stacked crates, a metal case under the cot. Locked. She knelt, picked the latch open with a knife and lifted the lid. Inside were communication parts, an encrypted transmitter, its power light flickering faintly. She recognized the model instantly. Obsolete, decommissioned 5 years ago, but the frequency dial was set to something she hadn't seen since her last operation, a private Raven channel. Her heartbeat quickened. She turned it on. Static filled the air, sharp, cold, restless. Then, beneath the hiss, a voice cracked through, distant but clear enough to stop her breath. Raven 3, if you're hearing this, don't trust command. They're not who they were. She froze. The voice was Landon's. If they sent you, it means they've already lost control. Gray Waters isn't extraction. It's containment. Burn the files. Find the girl. You'll know her when you see her. The message cut out, replaced by static that didn't fade. Elena stared at the transmitter, the words echoing in her chest. Find the girl. Her fingers tightened around the device. Hale's warning from the night before whispered back, trust no one outside Raven. She had assumed that meant outsiders, but maybe it meant him, command. She turned off the transmitter and sat back, the wooden floor creaking beneath her. The world had tilted again. If Landon was right, she wasn't here to find him. She was here to be erased with him. She drew a slow breath, mind recalibrating. Step 1, verify the message source. Step 2, intercept before they intercept her. Step 3, find the girl. She stood and crossed to the window. The sea stretched endlessly, waves slamming against the shore with mechanical rhythm. She could almost hear Landon's voice again, low, amused, teaching her how to survive. Always assume someone's watching, he'd told her once, because they usually are. She scanned the horizon. A reflection faint, glassy, caught her eye, a glint from the far end of the pier, scope glare. Sniper! Her body moved before thought caught up. She dropped, rolling behind the table as the window exploded. Glass showered the floor. A single shot, suppressed but close. The report echoed once and vanished. Elena's mind sharpened instantly, angles, trajectories, elevation. The shot had come from high ground, maybe the radio tower beyond the docks. Distance, 400 meters. She was being hunted. She crawled low, grabbed the transmitter, the map, and the knife. No time for more. Another round tore through the wall, splintering wood inches from her shoulder. She moved. Out the side door, down the stairs, feet hitting the wet boards silently despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. She ducked between boats, eyes scanning for movement. The shooter would have repositioned. Trained, efficient, not a local, which meant someone knew she was here. The thought hit her like a physical weight. She wasn't just found, she was expected. Her breath condensed in the cold as she crouched behind a crate, pulling a compact pistol from her boot. She hadn't planned on needing it this soon, but need wasn't up for debate. A flicker of movement to her right, shadow crossing between boats. She turned just enough to see a figure descending the tower ladder, rifle slung, steps confident. Tall, lean. She aimed, then stopped. The stride, the angle of the head, the pause before the next step. She knew that walk. Landon, she whispered. He turned as if hearing it through the wind. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, or maybe she only imagined it. Then he disappeared into the fog. The world went still again. She stayed crouched, breathing hard, every sense lit up. Part of her wanted to chase him. The other part remembered how many times chasing had meant dying. When the fog cleared minutes later, he was gone. Only footprints remained, leading toward the northern cliffs. She followed slowly, weapon lowered but ready. Each step brought back something she tried to forget, missions that blurred into memory, the smell of oil, the whisper of Greenlight before the storm. The trail ended at a small ridge overlooking the sea. Below, a single boat drifted, engine off, tethered to nothing. On the deck, another figure, smaller, slender, a girl, maybe 16, maybe younger. Her hair whipped in the wind as she looked up at the cliffs directly at Elena. For a second, time fractured. The words from Landon's message pulsed in her mind. Find the girl. Then the boat engine roared to life, and before Elena could move, it sped into the mist. She lowered her weapon slowly, her breath visible in the cold air. The mission had just changed shape again. Behind her, somewhere in the fog, boots crunched against gravel, deliberate, unhurried. She turned, weapon raised. The Admiral stepped out of the mist, alone, no escort, no pretense. "Stand down, Morales," he said quietly. Her finger hovered over the trigger. "You followed me," she said. "I sent you," he corrected. "There's a difference." He took a slow step closer. "You were never supposed to find him. The operation wasn't about retrieval, it was about containment." Her pulse thudded. Containment of what? "Of who?" he said. "Landon crossed a line. Whatever he's carrying, whatever that girl is, it can't reach the mainland." The words hit her harder than any bullet. "You lied to me," she whispered. He didn't deny it. "I gave you a chance to do this clean. Don't make me regret that." Elena's hands trembled, not from fear, from something far more dangerous: clarity. The Admiral's voice softened. "You know what happens if you go rogue again. There won't be a third chance." She stared at him for a long moment, then holstered her weapon. "You should have let me stay invisible," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked past him, down toward the beach, leaving the Admiral alone with the echo of her footsteps. The wind howled louder, carrying the scent of salt and smoke. Somewhere in the fog a girl was running, a man was hiding, and a past that refused to die was waking for real this time. And for the first time since the hallway, Elena Morales didn't know which side of the mission she was on. Who was the girl on the boat? That question burned through Elena's mind long after the sound of the engine faded into the mist. The image of her, small, sharp-eyed, standing defiant against the wind, stayed in her vision like an afterimage you couldn't blink away. The girl had looked right at her, not startled, not afraid, almost as if she'd recognized her. And that was the part that scared Elena most. The Admiral's words still echoed in her skull: containment, not rescue, not recovery, containment. Whatever that girl was, whoever she was, Command saw her as a threat, and Landon was protecting her. That meant one of two things: either he'd gone rogue, or he'd seen something that made Command the enemy. Elena knew which possibility she feared more. She moved through the fog along the cliffs, boots crunching over wet gravel. The sea below crashed in rhythmic fury, spraying salt across her face. Her communicator blinked faintly with a locator ping, a faint signal bouncing off the last coordinates she'd traced from the boat. 59 degrees 03 N, 24 degrees 37 E. About 2 clicks north, toward the abandoned shipyards. She started walking. The world around her narrowed to sound and breath, the rasp of her inhale, the echo of her steps, the hum of memory pressing at the edges. She tried to push Landon's voice from her mind but couldn't. "You can't serve two truths, Morales, not in this line of work." He used to say that after every mission, when they returned from operations that didn't exist, when they cleaned blood off weapons that weren't issued. Back then, she thought he meant loyalty. Now she wasn't sure if he'd been warning her. By the time she reached the edge of the shipyards, the fog had thinned into a pale silver mist. The place was dead, cranes rusted, docks half-collapsed, boats abandoned like carcasses of a forgotten industry. But to someone like her, dead places always had echoes. She crouched, studying the ground, wet sand, 2 sets of footprints, one small, one heavier, parallel, not overlapping. They were walking together. Her chest tightened. Landon was with the girl. She followed the tracks deeper into the yard. The wind shifted, bringing with it the faint metallic scent of burned oil and something else: smoke. She rounded a corner. Ahead, one of the warehouse doors hung open, its hinges groaning softly in the wind. Light flickered inside. Elena drew her pistol, lowered her stance, and entered silently. Inside, shadows stretched long across the concrete floor. A small fire burned in a metal barrel near the center of the room, and beside it, hunched over a crate covered with scattered papers and radio parts, was Landon. He looked older, yes, but not broken. His movements were still precise, deliberate, the kind of control that never faded, even after years underground. He didn't look up right away. I was wondering how long it'd take them to send you, he said quietly. She froze. Then you knew I was coming. I didn't know who they'd send, he said, but I hoped it'd be you. He finally turned and for a second just one time collapsed. Years fell away. She saw the man she used to trust, the man who taught her to aim without hesitation, to believe that service was sacred. But the relief in her chest died quickly when she saw the shadows under his eyes. Guilt lived there now. You look good, he said softly. You look hunted. He smiled faintly, fair. Her weapon stayed at her side, not aimed but not holstered either. The Admiral said you crossed a line. Yeah, Landon said, his line. He turned back to the table and picked up a small photograph. They didn't tell you about her, did they? The girl. He nodded, her name's Anya. Elena frowned, she's just a kid. She's a project, he said. One they swore was shut down when Raven dissolved, but it was. They took what we did, the tactics, the pattern recognition, the psychological conditioning, and started applying it to civilians. Children. Testing what happens when you build instinct before morality. Elena's pulse quickened. You're saying they trained her. I'm saying they built her. She blinked. What do you mean built? He looked at her then, not with defiance but pity. You remember the neural mapping trials, right? The predictive behavioral models. You walked out before the prototypes went live. Because they were unethical. Because they were inhuman, he said sharply. Silence stretched between them. The sound of waves and wind filled the space. Finally, she said, what does she have to do with you? She escaped, he said. Or they let her escape. Either way, she's the key to everything they've done since. They used Raven's intel archives to build her every mission, every tactic, every reaction pattern. You, me, everyone we ever served with, she carries fragments of us. Elena's breath caught. Fragments. She knows you, Morales. She knows how you think, how you move. She's not just remembering us. She's running us. The realization hit her like a slow burn spreading through her veins. She's a weapon. He nodded, and she's terrified. Elena took a step back, lowering her weapon. The fire crackled quietly. You brought her here. I'm trying to get her out, he said. There's a ship heading for Iceland in 2 days. After that, she disappears. New name, new life. Maybe she gets to be a person instead of a product. Elena's mind raced. You think they'll let that happen? No, he said simply. That's why I sent for you. That stopped her. You sent for me. Who do you think Hale listens to? His tone was soft, but the truth in it was hard. You were the only one who could walk into this mess without drawing suspicion. The only one who could find me before they did. Her jaw tightened. So this whole mission was never theirs, he said. It was mine. She stared at him, every nerve screaming. You used me. I trusted you, he corrected. You were the only one I could. The silence that followed was raw. Between them stood 6 years of absence and everything unsaid. Finally she whispered, Why me, Landon? Because you never stopped caring, he said softly. And because you still believe that doing the right thing means something. Her throat tightened. You're wrong about that. He smiled faintly. Then why are you here? She didn't answer, couldn't. The sound of movement broke the moment, light footsteps near the back door. Elena turned instantly, weapon raised. The girl. Anya stepped into the glow of the firelight, small frame, dark hair, eyes too steady for her age. She looked between them like she was studying not 2 strangers, but data points. You found her, Landon said quietly. Elena didn't lower her gun right away. Something about the girl's expression unsettled her, not fear, not anger, but calm. The kind of calm that doesn't belong to children. You're Elena Morales, Anya said, not asked, stated. How do you know that? Elena asked. Anya tilted her head. Because I remember you. Elena's stomach dropped. Remember me. I've never met you, the girl said, but I have your memory signatures, the way you think, the way you hesitate before you shoot. Elena's hand trembled. What did they do to you? Anya blinked slowly. They called it enhancement, I call it noise. Landon stepped forward. Anya, go get your pack. The girl obeyed without question, disappearing into the shadows near the back. Elena turned to him, voice low. You can't protect her forever, they'll come. I know. And when they do, they'll kill you both. Then I'll make sure it means something, he said. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't have to choose sides tonight. Just help me get her out. After that, walk away. They'll think you were never involved. Elena looked at him, the man who had once been her compass, now standing against everything they once swore to serve. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But in the distance, she could already hear it, faint, rhythmic, metallic, the sound of rotor blades cutting through the fog. Helicopters. Her communicator blinked red. An encrypted message appeared on the screen. Raven 3, stand down. TARGTS ACQRED. Operation terminate. Her blood ran cold. Landon saw it too. They're early. You told them where you were. I told them nothing. Anya reappeared, a small backpack slung over her shoulder. She looked at Elena, calm even as the sound of approaching rotors grew louder. They're here for me, she said. You should go. Elena stared at her, at the child who spoke like an operative. Then she looked at Landon. You can still surrender, maybe Hale. Hale's not in charge anymore, Landon said. He answers to people who don't use names. The first searchlight swept across the windows. Shadows danced across the walls. Elena's instincts screamed at her to choose now. Landon reached into his coat, pulled out a small data drive and pressed it into her hand. If I don't make it out, you get this to the press, to anyone who will listen. The world needs to know what they built. She hesitated. Landon. Please, he said, for the ghosts. Another light cut across the door, the sound of boots, dozens, closing fast. Landon turned to Anya. Time to go, kid. He moved toward the back exit. Elena followed, every muscle taut. They burst into the cold night, the roar of the helicopters deafening now. Searchlights swept across the yard, slicing through fog like knives. Commands barked over loudspeakers. Landon grabbed Anya's hand and ran. Elena covered their flank, weapon raised, firing twice suppressive shots into the dark. Then the explosion hit, a shockwave of light and sound as the warehouse went up in flames behind them. The blast threw Elena to the ground. Her ears rang. The world spun. She blinked through the smoke, saw Landon dragging Anya toward the docks. But from the sky, another spotlight locked on them. Raven 6, a voice thundered through a loudspeaker. Stand down. Landon turned, looked back at Elena through the haze. For a second she saw it, the same look from years ago, before every impossible mission. A look that said, trust me. Then he shoved Anya forward. Run. The gunfire began. Elena scrambled up, lungs burning, vision blurred. The girl disappeared into the fog. Landon turned to cover her, but before he could fire, a single shot cracked through the chaos. He fell. Elena froze. Her own voice ripped through the night. Landon. But there was no answer, only the roar of the sea and the flames reflecting in her eyes. And above it all, the Admiral's words returned, cold and merciless. Containment. She realized then what that really meant. It was never about saving anyone. It was about burying the truth. And as the helicopters circled and the fog swallowed the shore, Elena Morales made her choice. She ran not away, but after the girl. Because if Landon died for something, she had to know what it was. When the gunfire finally stopped, the world didn't. It just changed its sound. The rotors faded first, swallowed by the fog rolling back from the sea. Then came the hiss of burning fuel, the slow groan of collapsing metal, the whisper of waves striking charred wood. The whole shipyard smelled of salt and carbon. Elena's ears rang as she crawled from behind an overturned crate. Her knees were bleeding, her coat ripped, her weapon half jammed from grit. Smoke blurred the horizon into a dull smear of gray. "Landon," she whispered at once, not expecting an answer. None came. A few yards away, the sand was churned into mud where he'd fallen. She saw the dark stain, the empty casing glinting beside it, but not the body. They'd taken him, either the wind or the men who called themselves command. She pushed herself upright. The communicator on her wrist blinked faintly. Signal lost. Good. If they couldn't track her, she still had a chance. Somewhere out there, the girl was running. The fog thickened as she left the ruins behind, following small footprints that led toward the dunes. Each print was light but not panicked, calculated. The girl knew how to move unseen. That made Elena's stomach knot. The sky was beginning to pale, dawn stretching thin across the horizon. The light made everything look harmless for half a breath. Then she saw the outline ahead, a collapsed boathouse half buried in sand. The prince went straight inside. Elena drew her pistol, switched off the safety, and entered. The boathouse smelled of salt and damp wood. Dust hung in the air like fog made solid. She listened, really listened, the way you do when you expect the world to whisper back. Nothing. She took another step. A floorboard creaked, and from the corner came a soft voice. "You shouldn't have come." Elena pivoted, weapon raised. Anya stood in the shadow between two beams, a small shape in an oversized coat, eyes reflecting the faint light seeping through the cracks. In one hand she held a flare gun, not pointed, just ready. "I didn't come to arrest you," Elena said. "I came to get you out." Anya's expression didn't change. "That's what he said." Elena lowered the weapon slightly. "Landon's gone." "I know." The words were quiet, but they didn't tremble. "I felt it." Elena blinked, felt it. The girl hesitated, then tapped the side of her head. They mapped emotional patterns, yours, his, others. When someone tied to the network dies, the link fades. You can feel the silence. Elena's throat went dry. "You're saying they connected you to us?" "Not just connected, copied. They said it was to preserve tactical efficiency." The words sounded rehearsed, like something memorized under bright lights. Elena's stomach turned. She lowered the pistol completely. "Anya, what did they do to you?" The girl looked away. "You don't want to know." "I wouldn't ask if I didn't." Anya studied her for a long time, as if weighing the risk of truth. Then she spoke, voice even, detached. "They used fragments of the Raven database, combat memories, decision trees, cognitive blueprints. They trained simulations based on your missions. Then they downloaded the surviving sequences into neural hosts." Elena stared. "Into children." Anya nodded. "We weren't supposed to grow. We were supposed to replace you." Silence filled the space, heavy and cold. Elena sat slowly on a broken crate. The pistol hung useless at her side. She remembered the early trials, the endless psychological evaluations, the talk of adaptive instinct models. She walked away before the tests began, thinking it would all be shut down. She hadn't imagined it would crawl back from the dark wearing a child's face. Anya watched her. "He told me you'd understand." "Landon." The girl nodded. "He said you carried the weight, even when they told you to drop it." Elena exhaled shakily. "He died trying to save you." Anya's voice softened. "Then maybe he didn't die for nothing." She turned and walked toward the far wall, pulling back a tarp. Beneath it, hidden in a hollow of sand, sat a metal case no bigger than a backpack. A faint blue light blinked on its side. "They called this the archive," she said. "It holds every record of the program, every name, every location, every file they erased." Elena knelt beside it. "And you want me to destroy it?" I want you to choose, Anya said. If you open it, the truth goes public, but they'll kill you before it reaches anyone. If you destroy it, you live, but no one will ever know what happened to us. Elena looked at the case. The blinking light pulsed like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, she felt the full weight of command again, not the rank but the responsibility. Lives balanced on silence. Justice balanced on survival. Outside, the wind shifted. She heard distant engines, multiple vehicles closing fast. They tracked the signal, she whispered. Anya nodded. They always do. Elena grabbed the case and slung it over her shoulder. We're leaving. There's nowhere safe, the girl said calmly. Then we make somewhere. She took Anya's hand and pulled her through the back of the boathouse, out into the dunes. The sun was rising now, thin light cutting through fog. Shadows of approaching jeeps blurred against the horizon. Elena led them toward the cliffs. Every step sank deep into sand. The girl moved without complaint, breathing steady, almost too steady for someone her age. Do you feel fear? Elena asked as they climbed. Yes, Anya said, but not the way you do. It's information, not paralysis. That's not fear, Elena muttered. That's programming. Anya looked up at her. Then teach me the difference. The words hit Elena harder than the wind. For a second, she almost forgot the engines behind them. At the top of the ridge, the land broke into scattered ruins, old concrete bunkers from another war, half buried in grass. She pushed Anya inside the nearest one and set the case on the ground. Stay down, she said. What are you doing? Buying us time. Elena slipped outside, crouched behind the bunker wall and watched through her scope. 3 jeeps, black uniforms, no insignia, standard for off-record operations. She counted 8 men moving in a grid. The first one raised a comm radio. Control, visual negative, proceeding to Sector 9. Sector 9, the boathouse. They hadn't seen the footprints leading here yet. She waited. The wind shifted again, carrying their voices away. Timing, distance, elevation. Every calculation surfaced without conscious thought. The old part of her, the operative, woke completely. One man drifted from formation, scanning with his rifle. When he turned, she fired once. Suppressed. Clean. He dropped without a sound. The others turned instantly. Shouts, confusion. She ducked back behind the wall and moved positions. Another shot, 2 down. Then silence. She listened for the next movement and felt the wrong kind of stillness. They'd gone quiet not from fear but coordination, flanking. A voice barked through a megaphone. Raven 3, you're out of time. Hand over the asset. Her pulse slowed. They knew exactly who she was. She leaned around the corner, fired once more for cover, and ran back inside the bunker. Anya was crouched beside the case, hands pressed over her ears. They know your call sign, the girl said. They know everything, Elena replied. She knelt beside her. Listen to me. When I say run, you go east toward the cliffs. There's a tunnel that leads to the beach. Follow it, don't stop. What about you? I'll follow. Anya studied her face, as if testing whether the lie was statistical or emotional. Finally, she nodded. Elena checked her ammo. 4 rounds left. Enough to make them cautious, not enough to win. She pressed the data drive Landon had given her into the case's port. The lights blinked faster. What are you doing? Combining them, she said. If one gets destroyed, the other carries the truth. Outside, footsteps approached. Shadows stretched across the doorway. Elena turned to Anya. Now. The girl sprinted into the tunnel, small shape swallowed by dark. Elena rolled a grenade toward the entrance and dove behind the wall. The explosion shook the bunker, filling it with dust and smoke. When the ringing in her ears faded, she was already moving, grabbing the case, ducking out the back. She ran through the smoke, heart pounding, lungs burning. Behind her she heard shouting, "Target moving west." She smiled grimly. Let them look the wrong way. By the time she reached the cliff edge, the sun was a full orange disk over the water. The sea looked calm, deceitfully peaceful. She scanned below, no sign of Anya yet, just surf breaking against black rocks. Then movement, a small figure emerging from the tunnel mouth below, running toward a cove. Safe for now. Elena exhaled, knees weakening. She looked at the case on her shoulder. The light was still blinking. Landon's drive was inside. The truth existed. For the first time since the hallway, she allowed herself a thought that wasn't strategy or survival. Maybe this was what he'd meant by ghosts, waiting for the living to remember them. She turned toward the sound of engines again. Dust rose along the ridge. They were still coming. Elena Morales tightened her grip on the case, checked her last magazine, and whispered into the wind. Service doesn't end when the uniform does. Then she disappeared into the smoke. A shadow carrying the truth that could burn an empire. And a promise she refused to break. You learn a lot about trust when every mile tries to kill you. By the second night they'd left the cliffs behind. The Baltic wind had turned to ice, sliding off the sea and through the pine forests that bordered the coast road. Elena drove an old supply truck she'd stolen from the docks, diesel engine coughing, headlights off, the smell of salt and metal following them like ghosts. Anya sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket, eyes half closed but never asleep. Every few minutes she'd glance at the side mirror, tracking the road behind them with the focus of a sniper. It was the kind of awareness no child should have. "You ever sleep?" Elena asked finally. "Sometimes," the girl said, "when I can turn the noise down." "What noise?" Anya tapped her temple. "Echoes, yours, Landon, the others. When you think too loud, I feel it." Elena's hands tightened on the wheel, then stopped listening. "I can't, it's how they built me." The words sat heavy between them. The road curved inland, swallowed by fog. Elena could feel exhaustion creeping in, the bone-deep kind that came from more than running. Every hour brought a new question. How long before the men in black caught up? How long before the Admiral stopped pretending she was worth saving? She slowed near a junction, killed the lights, and let the truck roll into the trees. They coasted to a stop beside an abandoned ranger cabin half buried in snowdrifts. "Out," she said. Anya obeyed without hesitation, stepping into the knee-deep snow. Her breath misted white. Inside the cabin it smelled of old wood and ash. A few broken chairs, a fireplace half full of soot. Elena checked the corners, the windows, the ceiling beams, habits that never died. When she was sure it was safe, she set the metal case on the table. Its blue indicator still blinked, steady as a pulse. Anya stood beside it, eyes reflecting the light. "You're going to open it, aren't you?" Elena met her gaze. "I need to know what's in there before we decide who to trust." The girl said nothing, just sat on the floor, knees to chest, watching the snow drift past the window. For the first time she looked her age. Small, human. Elena crouched by the fireplace, struck a match, and lit the kindling. The warmth crawled slowly into the room. Only then did she pry the case open. Inside were two drives, the one Landon had given her nested in the core of the larger archive. A small hollow projector blinked beside them. She powered it on. Light spilled across the wall, lines of text, schematics, names scrolling upward faster than she could read. Then came the images. Children in sterile rooms, electrodes along their skulls, instructors in raven uniforms observing through glass. Every subject labeled prototype, every file stamped decommissioned. Her stomach turned. She saw her own name in the margins, Morales, ELENA/candidate source listed under Pattern Alpha, the foundation template for moral resilience. They hadn't just used her training data, they'd used her conscience. She shut the projector off. The light vanished, leaving only the fire's glow on the girl's face. "That's why they can't let this out," Elena said quietly. "It's not just illegal, it's a confession." Anya's voice was small. Does it mean I'm not real? Elena looked at her for a long moment. It means someone tried to build a machine that feels, and somehow they made a person instead. The girl's eyes shone, reflecting the fire. He said you'd say something like that. Landon. She nodded. He told me if everything went wrong to find you. He said you still believed people could be good. Elena almost laughed, tired, bitter. He gave me too much credit. Outside, a low rumble cut through the night. Not thunder, engines. Several of them. She killed the fire instantly, plunged the cabin into dark. Through the crack in the curtain, she saw headlights sweeping the forest road. They're close, she whispered. Anya moved to the corner, quiet as falling snow. They'll use drones first, heat signatures. How do you know? Because that's what you would do. Elena froze. She hated how right the girl was. She pulled her coat back on and grabbed the case. We move now. They slipped out the back door into the trees. The snow was soft enough to muffle their steps but deep enough to slow them. Every breath burned. The moon broke through clouds, silver on the frost. Behind them, the cabin lights flared white for an instant, then exploded. The shockwave lifted the snow like ash. They hit the ground. Debris whistled past. When the echo faded, Anya whispered, "They weren't supposed to find us so fast." "They didn't," Elena said. "They predicted us." They moved again, uphill through the forest. The terrain steepened, trees thinning into rock. From the ridge, Elena could see the coastline again, a strip of ice-blue horizon. Somewhere beyond that lay the border and the kind of anonymity that came with different governments and different wars. "Can you make it that far?" she asked. Anya nodded, breath quick. "You forget I'm part of you." "Then you know I never quit." The girl smiled faintly for the first time. "Exactly." They walked until dawn. By then the trees gave way to an abandoned rail line, rusted tracks vanishing into fog. A derelict freight car sat half-dipped on the embankment. Shelter. Barely. Inside, the air smelled of rust and rain. Elena dropped the case, sat against the wall, and finally let herself breathe. Anya curled beside her, exhausted but alert. She looked at the case, then at Elena. "What happens when we reach the border?" "We find someone who will listen." "Do you really think anyone will?" Elena hesitated. "I think silence is worse." The girl studied her, then said quietly, "They'll never stop, you know that." "I don't need them to stop," Elena said. "I just need the truth to outlast them." They sat in silence for a while, the wind whistling through broken seams in the metal. Elena dozed without meaning to, head against the cold wall, the faint rhythm of the rails humming like memory. When she woke, Anya was gone. Panic sliced through the fog of exhaustion. She bolted upright, scanning the open doorway, tracks in the snow small leading east, and beside them larger prints, boots, fresh. Damn it! She grabbed the case and followed the trail at a run. The cold burned her lungs, branches tore at her coat. Ahead, voices, male, distant but closing. She slowed near a clearing. Through the trees she saw them, two command operatives dragging Anya toward a black transport. The girl didn't fight. She just watched the horizon like she could already see something beyond it. Elena raised her weapon, exhaled once and fired. One man dropped. The other spun, returning fire. The crack of rifles shattered the stillness. Snow erupted around her. She moved laterally, sighted again, 2 shots, clean. Silence. Anya stood motionless, face pale against the dark uniforms at her feet. Elena ran to her. "Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head slowly. "They said they were taking me home." Elena grabbed her shoulders. "You are home now, you hear me?" Anya's voice was barely a whisper. "You don't believe that." Elena looked at her, really looked, and realized the girl was right. Home was a word for people who hadn't been turned into evidence. She pressed the pistol into Anya's small hands. "Keep it pointed down, safety on, only if you have no choice." Anya stared at the weapon, then back at her. You think I ca? I think you shouldn't have to. They left the bodies and kept moving east. The snow lightened, the wind easing as the forest thinned into open tundra. Far ahead, a radio tower rose from the mist, a skeleton of steel against a pale sky. Elena knew what that meant. A chance to send the files. We can transmit from there, she said. If the relay's still live, the signal will bounce across 3 networks before they can jam it. And if it's not, then we climb higher and pray. Anya almost smiled. That sounds like something you'd do. Don't start learning my bad habits. They reached the base by mid-morning. The ladder was half frozen, the metal biting through gloves. Elena slung the case over her back and started climbing, Anya close behind. The higher they went, the more the world unfolded, endless white, streaks of dark water where the sea broke through ice, the smoke from the destroyed cabin miles behind them. At the top platform, the wind howled so hard it felt alive. Elena connected the case to the relay terminal, fingers stiff from cold. The interface flickered, old but functional. Come on, she whispered, talk to me. The light turned green, signal acquired. Anya crouched beside her, eyes wide. If you send it, they'll know exactly where we are. Elena nodded, I know. Then why? Because truth needs a witness. She hit transmit. The case hummed, lights pulsing faster. Lines of data streamed across the cracked screen. Then static jammed. She cursed under her breath. They're blocking the uplink. Anya closed her eyes. Let me try. What? I can boost the signal through me. Neural link, same frequency range. It'll only work once. Elena's instinct screamed no, but the girl was already reaching for the port, fingertips glowing faintly from the charge building beneath her skin. Anya. If I don't, Landon dies for nothing. The light flared. The hum rose to a pitch that rattled the steel under their feet. For a moment the world seemed to pause, then connection. The screen blazed green, transmission complete. Elena exhaled, but Anya collapsed. She caught her before she hit the deck. The girl's pulse was faint but steady. Smoke curled from the connector at her wrist. You're okay, Elena whispered. You did it. Anya's eyes fluttered open. Are we free now? Elena looked at the horizon, where dark specks of approaching helicopters blurred against the sky. Not yet, she said, but the world's watching now. She lifted the girl into her arms, the wind tearing at her coat. Below, the snow swirled like ash. And as the first shadow crossed the sun, Elena Morales did what she'd always done. She moved forward, not because she believed she'd survive, but because stopping would mean silence again. And silence, she knew, was the enemy. The wind at the top of the tower howled like a wounded thing. Beneath it, the rotors came back. Elena stood over Anya's unconscious form, coat whipping in the gale. The cold cut through her bones, but she barely felt it. Down below, the world moved, small black dots of incoming helicopters slicing through the fog, their formation precise, deliberate. They'd found them. Of course they had. She looked once at the terminal screen, still glowing green, transmission complete. The data was gone, scattered into thousands of civilian networks by now. Journalists, watchdogs, human rights observers, every shadow organization that once whispered about Project Ivory would soon have proof. For the first time since Raven disbanded, silence wasn't on their side. Elena checked Anya's pulse again, steady, weak, but alive. You did it, she whispered. You really did. The girl didn't answer. Below, the first helicopter hovered level with the tower, searchlights sweeping over the platform. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Raven 3, this is Admiral Hale. Stand down. The words hit her chest like a memory. She stepped into the light, raising her hands not in surrender, but to show the girl behind her was still breathing. Funny, she called out over the roar. Didn't think admirals handled retrieval personally. A pause then. You left me no choice. The side door of the helicopter opened. Inside, behind the reinforced glass, Hale stood, older, heavier, but the same eyes. The same stillness she'd once mistaken for integrity. He gestured for the pilot to hold steady. The wind churned snow around them like a blizzard of ash. Elena, his voice came through the comms now, direct, cold. You've started something you can't control. Do you even know what you've released? Everything you buried, she said. Do you think the world will believe it? They'll see enough to ask the right questions. His tone sharpened. You compromised a defense operation. You disobeyed direct orders. You aided a rogue agent and a classified prototype. You think this makes you righteous? She almost smiled. No, it just makes me awake. He sighed, that tired, performative sound she remembered from every briefing where loss had to be reframed as necessity. Bring her in, he ordered off comms. From the second chopper, ropes dropped. Tactical units descended faceless in black armor, rifles ready. Elena drew her pistol, one arm steady, the other shielding Anya. Don't do this, Hale said. I can still write your report clean. You can come back. None of this has to end like a tragedy. She laughed softly. It already did. Then the first soldier fired. She moved without thought, returning fire, ducking behind a steel beam. The shot sparked off the frozen metal, shattering bits of railing. She dropped two before the others reached cover. One round slammed into her shoulder. The impact spun her sideways. Pain seared hot through the cold. She forced herself upright, vision tunneling. Anya, she shouted, run. The girl stirred weakly, confusion clouding her gaze. No, not without you. Now. Anya crawled toward the maintenance ladder, slipping on frost, dragging herself down rung by rung. The case with the archive was still slung over her shoulder. Hale's voice echoed across the wind. Do not let the asset escape. Elena turned, firing her last rounds at the lead soldier. Two hit center mass. He fell. She ducked again, shoulder throbbing, lungs raw from the cold. Then came the deep metallic creak, the sound she knew too well. The tower wasn't built to take this much stress. Every bullet was shaking loose decades of rust. She risked a glance over the edge. Anya was halfway down. The girl looked up, eyes wide, pleading, and Elena felt something inside her finally fracture. She'd been trained to save missions, not people. But this wasn't a mission anymore. Elena holstered the empty pistol, grabbed a rusted maintenance cable and clipped it to her belt. Then she jumped. The freefall stole her breath. The cable whined, metal shrieking, heat burning through the harness. She hit the lower platform hard, rolling, bones jolting. The soldiers shouted above, moving to re-angle their sights. Go, she screamed at Anya, who was frozen halfway down. The girl obeyed this time, climbing faster. When her feet hit snow, she started to run, not aimlessly, but toward the coastline, the one place Command's reach had never fully owned. Elena followed as best she could, half running, half limping. Blood dripped down her arm, staining the snow behind her. The helicopters circled, floodlights sweeping. They reached the edge of the forest before the searchlights pinned them again. The ground trembled as one of the choppers descended to cut them off. Elena shoved Anya behind a boulder, then turned. Gun raised, even empty, the instinct refused to die. The door of the chopper opened again. Admiral Hale stepped out, alone, no guards, just him and the cold. He walked toward her slowly, snow crunching beneath his boots. You really don't understand what you've done. Then explain it, she said. You think exposure changes anything. We'll deny it. They always deny it. You'll be a traitor, the girl will be a ghost, and history will fold neatly around your absence. Elena exhaled, chest tight. Then maybe absence is the only thing that'll make them look. He studied her, expression unreadable. You used to be one of the best. Why throw it away for a lost cause? Because she's not a cause, Elena said quietly. She's a child. Hale's voice hardened. She's a weapon. No, she said. She's what we forgot we were fighting for. The Admiral's jaw clenched. Last chance, morals, stand down. Last chance, she echoed softly, to remember who we were. For a long moment, neither moved. The snow fell between them, gentle, indifferent. Then Hale raised his sidearm. Elena didn't flinch. The shot echoed across the coast, but not from his gun. A thin wisp of smoke curled from the tree line. Hale staggered, surprise breaking through his composure. He fell backward into the snow. Anya stepped out from the shadows, the pistol shaking in her hands, the same one Elena had given her hours ago. Her eyes were wet. You said only if I had no choice. Elena's breath hitched. You didn't. The girl's voice trembled. He would have killed you. Elena went to her, took the weapon gently, set it aside. And now you'll carry that sound forever. Anya's lips quivered. I already carried worse. For a moment, neither spoke. The rotors from above started to retreat, confusion breaking their formation. No command left to follow, no orders to obey. Elena looked out over the sea, endless gray water meeting sky. He was right about one thing, she murmured. You can't control what comes next. Then what do we do? Anya asked. Elena looked down at her. The girl's face was pale, streaked with tears, but there was something new there too, not programming, not instinct. Choice. We live with it, Elena said softly. We make it mean something. They started walking. The snow grew thicker, muting the sound of the world. Behind them, the tower still burned faintly against the dawn. By the time they reached the shoreline, light had begun to break over the horizon, a thin line of gold on steel gray water. An old fishing boat bobbed against the rocks, its paint peeling, its engine still intact. Elena helped Anya aboard. The girl curled against the railing, eyes heavy, exhaustion pulling her under. Elena took the wheel, scanning the open sea ahead. Somewhere beyond that horizon was freedom, or at least the version of it she could still believe in. She looked back once more at the coastline, at the rising smoke, at the fatting silhouettes of helicopters vanishing into the clouds. Somewhere, governments were already spinning the story, denying, deflecting. But this time, the files were public. The world had seen, and truth once seen could not be unseen. She didn't know if they'd survive the next day. But for the first time, survival wasn't the point. The girl stirred beside her. Where are we going? Elena smiled faintly. Someplace quiet. Anya nodded. He said you'd find it. Who? Landon, the girl murmured. He said you'd finally stop running. Elena looked out over the waves. The horizon shimmered with pale light. Maybe I just ran out of places to hide. For a while there was only the sound of the sea, steady, forgiving, endless. She rested one hand on the wheel, the other over the bandaged wound at her shoulder. The pain was sharp, real, the kind that reminded you you're still alive. In the distance, gulls wheeled over the water. The wind softened. And in that quiet, Elena Morales finally understood what Landon meant when he said service doesn't end when the uniform does. It ends when you stop believing the truth is worth bleeding for. The girl slept beside her. The horizon opened, and the soldier who once dusted trophies in a hallway steered a broken boat toward the light, carrying one child, one drive, and a truth too heavy to bury again. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.